My sister didn't even wait for the soil on our mother's grave to settle before she started talking about handling the estate. The words fell from her lips like coins into a collection plate, calculated, rehearsed, and devoid of any real grief. She sat at the head of our mother's dining table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals as children, but now she occupied it like a throne she'd been waiting years to claim. "Mom made it clear I'm the sole heir," she announced to the small gathering of relatives who had lingered after the funeral. Her voice carried that familiar tone, the one she'd perfected in childhood when she wanted to sound more important than she was. "Everything goes to me. The house, the investments, all of it." I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and dining room, still wearing my black dress, still feeling the weight of the cemetery dirt under my fingernails from when I'd thrown that handful of earth onto Mom's casket. My name never came up in her little speech. Not once. As if I hadn't spent the last 8 months sleeping in the chair beside Mom's hospital bed. As if I hadn't taken unpaid leave from work. Hadn't put my life on hold. Hadn't been the daughter who stayed. Before we continue, drop a comment. Where are you watching this from, and what time is it there? I'd love to know how far this story is reaching. There's something oddly comforting about knowing we're all carrying our silent battles at different hours, in different places. That week after the funeral blurred into a series of conversations I wasn't invited to join. My sister would take calls, in Mom's bedroom, our mother's bedroom, speaking in hushed, authoritative tones about appraisals and probate and financial advisors. When I tried to ask about documents, about Mom's actual will, she'd wave me off with that same dismissive gesture she'd used since we were children. "Don't worry about the legal stuff," she'd say, not even looking up from whatever papers she was shuffling through. "It's all taken care of. Mom and I discussed everything." But I remembered something else. I remembered the night Mom woke up from one of her medication-induced sleeps and gripped my hand with surprising strength. Her eyes were clearer than they'd been in weeks, and she whispered something that didn't make sense at the time. The blue book on my nightstand, page 127, "When you need to remember what matters." I had assumed she was talking about one of her romance novels, the ones she'd read and reread until the pages were soft as tissue paper. But that night, as my sister continued her phone calls downstairs, I slipped into Mom's room and found the book. It was her old copy of Jane Eyre, the one she'd had since college, with margins filled with her careful handwriting. Page 127 wasn't marked with anything profound about love or loss. Instead, tucked between the pages like a pressed flower, was a business card. Richard Henley, attorney at law, and beneath his name, in Mom's handwriting, "Call him. He has everything." I stared at that card for a long time, sitting on the edge of Mom's bed, breathing in the lingering scent of her lavender lotion. My sister's voice drifted up from downstairs, confident and commanding as she spoke to someone about finalizing the arrangements. She sounded so certain, so entitled to her certainty. I thought about all the times growing up when that certainty had steamrolled over me. The family vacations where my suggestions were dismissed. The Christmas mornings where her gifts were always more expensive, more thoughtful, more everything. The graduation party where she gave a speech about family values while I served drinks to her friends. The pattern of being seen but not heard, present but not important. But Mom had left me that card. Mom, who noticed everything, who saw how I'd been pushed to the margins of my own family. Mom, who in her final weeks had watched me with those knowing eyes that seemed to hold secrets. The next morning, while my sister was meeting with someone at the bank about accessing Mom's accounts, I made the call. "Henley Law Office," came a professional voice. "Hi," I said, suddenly feeling foolish. This is Sarah Collins. Eleanor Collins was my mother. She passed away last week, and I found your card. Sarah." The relief in the attorney's voice was unmistakable. "I've been waiting for your call. I was beginning to wonder if You'd received my messages. Messages. I'm sorry. What messages? A pause. Your sister told me she'd inform you about the will reading. We've had it scheduled for this Friday at 2:00. I specifically requested that both daughters be present. My hands began to shake. She never told me. Another pause. Longer this time. Sarah, I think you and I need to have a conversation. Can you come in today? I drove to his office in a daze, my mind replaying every interaction with my sister over the past week. Every dismissive comment, every time she'd spoken about Mom's wishes as if they were carved in stone. Every moment she'd made me feel like an intruder in my own family's grief. Richard Henley was a kind man in his 60s, with gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He offered me coffee and a chair across from his desk, and then he opened a file folder with my mother's name written across the tab. Your mother came to see me 6 months ago, he began carefully. She was very specific about what she wanted, and more importantly, very specific about why she wanted it. She mentioned that there had been patterns in your family, long-standing, patterns that she wanted to address. He pulled out a document, and I recognized Mom's signature at the bottom. Shaky but determined. She changed her will, Sarah. She made it very clear that both of her daughters should inherit equally. But she also established a trust fund for your Aunt Margaret. You know, your father's sister who never married and has been struggling financially. She wanted to make sure everyone was taken care of. The room seemed to tilt slightly. But my sister said, your sister has been operating under the assumption that the old will is still valid. The one from 15 years ago, when you were in college and your mother was going through her difficult period with your father's drinking. He leaned forward. Your mother was very aware that your sister might assume she was still the primary beneficiary. She specifically asked me to ensure you were present for the reading because she suspected there might be resistance to the changes. I thought about Mom during those college years, how fragile she'd seemed, how my sister had stepped in to help with so many decisions, how my sister had always positioned herself as the responsible one, the one who understood finances and legal matters. There's more, Mr. Henley continued. Your mother left detailed letters for both of you, explanations for her decisions. She spent a lot of time on your letter, Sarah. She wanted you to understand not just what she was leaving, you, but why. He handed me an envelope with my name written in Mom's careful script. My hands were trembling as I opened it. My dearest Sarah, it began. If you're reading this, then you've found Richard, and you've learned that I didn't leave you empty-handed. After all, I know your sister has probably made you feel invisible again. It's a pattern I should have stopped years ago, but I was too tired, too overwhelmed to fight it every time. You were the daughter who saw me, not just the mother who needed things done, not just the woman who was supposed to have answers, but me. You were the one who sat with me during those long nights when the pain was bad. You were the one who asked about my dreams, my fears, my memories of your father when he was young and sober and full of hope. Your sister loves me, but she loves the idea of me, the mother who could be managed, directed, improved upon. You loved the person I was, even when I was difficult, even when I was scared. The house goes to both of you equally, but I've left instructions that if one of you wants to sell and the other wants to keep it, the one who wants to keep it has the right of first refusal at appraised value. I suspect that will be you. You always loved that house, loved the garden, loved the way the morning light comes through the kitchen window. Don't let her steamroll you this time, my darling girl. You have every right to be in that room, to hear these words read aloud, to claim your place in this family. You are not invisible. You never were. I see you. I've always seen you. I was crying before I finished reading, not just from grief, but from a recognition so profound it felt like coming home to myself. Mom had seen it all. The pattern, the dismissal, the way I'd been trained to step aside and let my sister take center stage. and she'd done something about it. She also left specific instructions about the will reading, Mr. Henley said gently, handing me a tissue. She wanted it to be formal, with both daughters present, because she suspected your sister might try to handle things privately. She wanted witnesses. She wanted it official and undeniable. I thought about my sister at home, probably going through Mom's jewelry, deciding what to keep and what to donate, making plans for the house, calling contractors for renovations, acting like the sole proprietor of our family's legacy. "What do I do now?" I asked. "You show up on Friday," he said simply. "You let me read the will as your mother intended, and you prepare yourself for your sister to be very surprised." I drove home in silence, Mom's letter folded carefully in my purse. For the first time in a week, I felt like I could breathe fully. Not because of the inheritance, though the security it would provide was overwhelming to consider, but because Mom had seen me, had acknowledged not just my love, but the way that love had been overlooked. That evening, my sister was in Mom's kitchen, making notes on a yellow legal pad. She looked up when I walked in, and for a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Uncertainty, maybe, or guilt. "Where have you been?" she asked. "Running errands," I said, which wasn't exactly a lie. "Well, I've been dealing with the important stuff. The lawyer wants to meet Friday to go over some final paperwork. Nothing major, just transferring titles and getting everything official." She turned back to her legal pad. "You don't need to be there. These meetings are pretty boring." I poured myself a glass of water from Mom's pitcher, the one with the small chip on the handle that she'd refused to throw away because it still holds water just fine. "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected, "I think I should be there for Mom." My sister's pen stopped moving. "Sarah, I appreciate that you want to be involved, but this is really just procedural stuff, legal language and signatures. I can handle it." "I'm sure you can," I said, "but I'd like to be there anyway." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before. She was studying me, trying to read whether I suspected anything. The balance of power in the room shifted slightly, so subtly that she might not have noticed it. But I felt it. "Fine," she said finally. "If you really want to sit through a bunch of legal mumbo-jumbo." "I do," I said. That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, the smaller one, the one that had always been mine while my sister got the master bedroom whenever we visited, and read Mom's letter again. I thought about all the times I'd been made to feel like a supporting character in my own family's story. All the times my sister had spoken for me, over me, around me. Friday was 3 days away. 3 days to prepare myself for the moment when my sister's certainty would crack open like an egg, revealing the truth Mom had been protecting. That love isn't about being managed or improved upon. It's about being seen. Those 3 days passed like a held breath. My sister continued her elaborate charade of estate management, fielding calls from insurance companies and appraisers, speaking about my mother's house and my inheritance, with the casual ownership of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world. She even started talking about renovations, about turning Mom's sewing room into a home office, about finally getting rid of all that old furniture that's just taking up space. I watched her with new eyes, seeing not just the sister who'd overshadowed me my entire life, but a woman so accustomed to being central that she couldn't imagine a universe where she wasn't. There was something almost tragic about her confidence, the way she'd built her identity around being the daughter who mattered most. On Thursday night, she came into the kitchen where I was washing Mom's dishes, a ritual that had become my way of staying connected to the house, to the memory of all those evening conversations Mom and I had shared over soapy water and the day's small revelations. "You know," she said, leaning against the counter, "after tomorrow, we should probably talk about what you want to take with you. Some of Mom's jewelry, maybe some photos. I want to be fair about the sentimental stuff." The condescension in her voice was so familiar I almost missed how stunning it was. She was offering me keepsakes from my own mother's life, like party favors, small consolations for not being important enough to inherit anything substantial. "That's thoughtful of you," I said, not looking up from the plate I was drying. "I mean, I know this is hard, losing Mom and then having to deal with all the practical stuff. But you don't have to worry about any of it. I'll take care of everything." Take care of everything. The phrase echoed with years of similar dismissals. "I'll handle it. Don't worry about it. Let me take care of it." Always spoken with love, always delivered with a smile, but always resulting in my voice being smaller, my presence less significant. "I know you will," I said. That night I called Aunt Margaret, Mom's sister-in-law, Dad's sister, the one who'd never married and had spent her life working as a school librarian until her retirement last year. She lived in a small apartment across town, and I knew she'd been struggling since her pension hadn't stretched as far as she'd hoped. "Oh, honey," she said when she heard my voice. "How are you holding up? This whole week has been such a blur." "I'm okay," I said. "Aunt Margaret, did Mom ever talk to you about her plans for after?" A pause. "She did, actually. She called me a few months ago, asked me some questions about my finances, about whether I was managing okay on my own. I told her the truth, that it was tight, but I was getting by." "Why do you ask?" "Just wondering," I said. "I'll see you tomorrow, right? At the lawyer's office?" "Tomorrow?" Her voice was confused. "What's tomorrow?" My stomach dropped. "The will reading, Mr. Henley's office at 2:00. "Honey, nobody told me about any will reading. Your sister said everything was straightforward, that there wouldn't be any need for a formal reading." Of course she had. Of course my sister had decided that Aunt Margaret, like me, didn't need to be there for the boring legal stuff. But Mom had been specific about witnesses, about making it official and undeniable. "Aunt Margaret, I think you should be there. I think Mom would want you there." "Well, if you think it's important, I do. 2:00 at Henley Law Office on Maple Street." After I hung up, I sat in Mom's living room, surrounded by the furniture my sister was already planning to replace. The old rocking chair where Mom had nursed both of us as babies. The coffee table with the water rings from years of family dinners. The bookshelf filled with romance novels and gardening magazines and photo albums chronicling a life lived quietly, but fully. Tomorrow my sister would walk into that law office expecting a coronation. She'd probably dressed the part, chosen her most professional outfit, prepared her gracious acceptance speech for the inheritance she'd already spent months planning to manage. She'd expect Mr. Henley to hand her some papers to sign, maybe offer condolences, certainly confirm what she'd been telling everyone all week, that she was the sole heir, the responsible daughter, the one Mom had chosen. I thought about calling her, warning her somehow. The idea of watching her face when the truth came out felt cruel, even after years of being made to feel invisible. But then I remembered Mom's letter, the deliberate way she'd hidden Mr. Henley's card, the specific instructions about making it formal and undeniable. Mom had orchestrated this moment, had wanted her daughters to hear the truth read aloud in a room full of witnesses. This wasn't about cruelty. This was about justice. Quiet justice, the kind that doesn't announce itself with fanfare but simply sets the record straight. Friday morning, I woke before dawn and drove to the cemetery. Mom's grave still looked raw, too new, the flowers from the funeral already wilting, in their vases. I knelt on the damp grass and traced her name with my finger. "I found Richard," I whispered. "I found the card, and I read your letter. I understand now what you meant about what matters." The morning air was cold, and I could see my breath as I spoke to the freshly turned earth. "I'm not angry with her, Mom. I know you wouldn't want me to be angry, but I'm not going to be invisible anymore either. I'm going to show up today, and I'm going to let your words speak for themselves." A robin landed on the headstone, cocked its head at me, then flew away toward the rising sun. I took it as a sign. At 1:45, I arrived at Mr. Henley's office. The waiting room was small and comfortable, with leather chairs and landscapes on the walls. My sister was already there, sitting straight-backed and professional in a black suit I'd never seen before. She looked up when I entered, and I caught a flicker of surprise. "You're early," she said. "So are you." Aunt Margaret arrived a few minutes later, looking confused but determined. My sister's eyebrows rose when she saw her. "Margaret? What are you doing here?" "Sarah called me," Aunt Margaret said, settling into one of the leather chairs. "Said Eleanor would want me here." "I don't understand why," my sister began, but Mr. Henley's assistant appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Henley will see you now." His office was larger than the waiting room, with a massive oak desk and walls lined with law books. Mr. Henley stood when we entered, his manner professional but warm. He gestured to 3 chairs arranged in front of his desk. "Please, have a seat. I know this is a difficult time for all of you." My sister sat in the center chair, naturally assuming the position of primary importance. I took the chair to her left, Aunt Margaret to her right. Mr. Henley settled behind his desk and opened a thick file folder. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to express my condolences. Your mother was a remarkable woman, and I was honored to help her with her estate planning." "Thank you," my sister said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of speaking for the family. "I know Mom appreciated your help over the years." "Actually," Mr. Henley said carefully, "Eleanor and I primarily worked together in recent months. She came to me specifically because she wanted to make some important changes to her will." The word "changes" hung in the air like a bell that couldn't be unrung. I saw my sister's posture shift slightly, a barely perceptible stiffening. "Changes?" she said, her voice still controlled but with an edge of uncertainty. "Yes, significant. Changes that she wanted to ensure were properly documented and witnessed." He opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "Shall we begin with the reading?" My sister nodded, but I noticed her hands had moved to grip the arms of her chair. Mr. Henley began to read in the formal, measured tone that legal documents require. The opening was standard. Mom's name, the date, the declaration that this was her last will and testament. But as he continued, I watched my sister's face change from confident expectation to confusion, to something approaching panic. "To my daughter Sarah Elizabeth Collins, I leave my house at 42 Maple Grove Lane, along with all furnishings, personal effects, and household items contained therein. I also leave to Sarah 50% of my financial assets, including savings, investments, and life insurance policies." My sister's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "To my daughter Patricia Ann Collins, I leave 50% of my financial assets, including savings, investments, and life insurance policies." "Wait," my sister said, her voice cracking slightly. "Wait, that can't be right. Mom told me she said I was the sole heir. She said—" "To my sister-in-law Margaret Rose Collins," Mr. Henley continued, "I establish a trust fund in the amount of $50,000 to be managed by Henley Law Office, with monthly payments of $500 to ensure her comfort and security in her retirement years." Aunt Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears immediately sprang to her eyes. "Eleanor," she whispered. "Oh, Eleanor." Mr. Henley paused, looking at my sister with gentle but firm eyes. "Patricia, your mother was very clear about these changes. She came to me 6 months ago with specific instructions. She also left personal letters for each of you, explaining her decisions." He handed us each an envelope. My sister stared at hers as if it might bite her. "But the old will," she said, her voice small and confused. "The one from years ago. She told me I was the executor, that everything went to me. That will was superseded by this one, Mr. Henley explained. Your mother specifically revoked all previous wills when she executed this new one. She was very thorough. My sister opened her letter with shaking hands. I already knew what mine said, but I watched her face as she read Mom's words. I saw the moment she reached the part where Mom explained about patterns, about love versus management, about the difference between being seen and being useful. The room was silent, except for the soft sound of Aunt Margaret crying with relief and gratitude. When my sister finished reading, she folded the letter carefully and placed it in her lap. Her face had gone through several transformations: shock, denial, hurt, and finally something that looked like recognition. She knew, my sister said quietly. She knew I was going to assume. Your mother loved both of her daughters equally, Mr. Henley said gently, but she was concerned that one daughter's needs might be overlooked in favor of the other's expectations. My sister looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before. She was seeing me. Not as the younger sister who followed her lead, not as the supporting character in her family drama, but as a person with equal claim to our mother's love and legacy. I didn't know you were taking care of her, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. All those nights at the hospital. I thought you were just visiting. You never asked, I said, not unkindly. I never asked, she repeated, as if testing the truth of it. There were more papers to sign, more details to discuss. The house would need to be appraised, the financial assets divided, the trust fund established for Aunt Margaret. But the important part was over. The truth had been spoken, witnessed, made official and undeniable. As we left the lawyer's office, my sister walked beside me instead of ahead of me for the first time in decades. Sarah, she said as we reached our cars. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for assuming, for not including you, for making you feel like you didn't matter. Thank you, I said. The house, she continued. Mom left it to you specifically. She wanted you to have it. She wanted us both to have equal inheritance, I corrected. But yes, she knew I'd want to keep the house. All those renovation plans I was making. She shook her head. I was going to change everything. Get rid of her furniture, update the kitchen, make it more modern. Mom knew that too, I said gently. We stood in the parking lot for a moment. Two women who'd grown up in the same house but lived in different versions of the same family story. Can we try again? She asked. Can we be sisters instead of whatever we've been? I'd like that, I said. That evening, I sat in Mom's rocking chair, my rocking chair now, and read her letter one more time. The part that had touched me most wasn't about the inheritance or the house, or even the recognition of my caregiving. It was the final paragraph. You have spent your life making room for everyone else's importance. Now I'm making room for yours. Don't let anyone convince you to shrink back into the shadows. You belong in the light, my darling. You always have. 3 months later, my sister and I had dinner together at the house on Maple Grove Lane. She helped me plant new roses in Mom's garden, and we talked about our childhood, about the patterns we'd inherited and the ones we wanted to change. Aunt Margaret joined us sometimes, no longer worried about stretching her pension, finally able to buy the books she wanted and take the art classes she'd always dreamed about. The house still had Mom's furniture, still had the water-stained coffee table and the chipped water pitcher, but it also had something new. The sound of two sisters learning to see each other clearly, learning that love isn't about who gets the biggest piece of the pie, but about making sure everyone gets fed. My sister brought her children over on weekends, sometimes, and I watched them play in the same backyard where we'd grown up. I told them stories about their grandmother, about the woman who saw everything and remembered everyone and loved quietly but completely. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in that rocking chair and think about Mom's final gift to our family. Not the money or the house or even the trust fund for Aunt Margaret, though all of those mattered. Her real gift was the truth, delivered with the patient persistence of someone who understood that justice doesn't always announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like dawn through shutters, confirming what the heart has always known, that being seen is not a privilege to be earned, but a birthright to be claimed. They had celebrated early, speaking about inheritance as if love could be divided unequally, as if some daughters mattered more than others. But Mom had the final word, written in her careful script and sealed with the weight of law. In the end, the truth didn't need to shout to be heard. It only needed to be spoken aloud in a room full of witnesses, by a man with gentle eyes and a folder full of documents that proved what I'd always hoped, that I was never invisible after all.